The archives of the Galactic Concord, vast and crystalline, held records stretching back millennia, chronicling the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of stars, and the tedious minutes of 10,000 councils. Within these silent, glittering halls, humanity was a footnote, a brief entry under emergent species, type, carbon silicate, classification, delta minor. They were known, if known at all, for their volatile emotions, their chaotic societal structures, and a perplexing obsession with fleeting art forms. Their star traders were occasionally encountered, their diplomats earnest but ultimately inconsequential. The idea of them possessing any real power was laughable to the grand, ancient races of the Concord, particularly to the Kthar hegemony, whose warships, like obsidian blades, carved their dominance across 1,000 systems. For generations, humanity had broadcast its existence with a naive enthusiasm, extending hands of friendship and commerce to any who would listen. They established outposts on the fringes of settled space, terraformed marginal worlds with a stubborn persistence that the elder races found quaint, almost pitiable. Their pleas for equitable trade agreements were met with indulgent smiles and dismissive gestures in the marbled halls of Kthar Prime. Their warnings about resource depletion in shared nebulae were treated as the anxieties of a species yet to understand the galaxy's boundless bounty, a bounty the Kthar felt uniquely entitled to exploit. Admiral Varkos of the Kthar Third Expansionary Fleet, a being whose lineage was etched into the very command throne of his flagship, Hegemon's will, regarded humans with a particular disdain. He had overseen the pacification of several systems that bordered human exploratory territories. When human envoys protested the Kthar's encroachment into the Elysian fields, a cluster of garden worlds humanity had painstakingly seeded, Varkos had them ejected from his presence. Their mewling, he had reported to the hegemon, is an irritant, not a threat. They lack the teeth to enforce their desires, the spine to demand respect. The Elysian fields were rich in rare exotic particles, vital for Kthar hyperdrives. Humanity's claim was an inconvenience. The Concord, in its infinite, ponderous wisdom, had deemed the human claims, under review, a diplomatic euphemism for indefinite disregard. So, Varkos received his orders: secure the Elysian fields. The method was left to his discretion, with the implicit understanding that efficiency was paramount. The colony on Elysia 7, New Terra, was humanity's jewel in that sector, a vibrant world of sprawling green cities, azure oceans, and a population of nearly 10 million souls. They were scientists, artists, families, pioneers. They believed in the Concord's charter, in the idea of galactic peace. They did not believe a member of that august body would visit genocide upon them for the sake of engine fuel. The Kthar fleet did not announce its arrival with hails or warnings. They translated from hyperspace in a phalanx of brutalist warships, their forms blotting out Elysia VII's twin suns. Varkos gave the order without hesitation. Orbital kinetic impactors, great lances of superdense metal, rained down. Cities became craters. Oceans boiled. The verdant landscapes were seared black. The planetary defense grid, designed to deter pirates and rogue asteroids, was obliterated in minutes. The Kthar did not stop there. They deployed atmospheric incinerators, ensuring nothing organic survived. It was methodical. It was thorough. It was a statement. A single human freighter, the Stardust Drifter, captained by a grizzled veteran named Elias Thorne, had been making a clandestine supply run, attempting to bypass Kthar tariffs. It was several astronomical units distant, hidden within an asteroid cluster, its crew observing the system through a gravitic telescope. They watched in frozen, silent horror as New Terra was systematically unmade. They recorded every moment, the silent plea of the dying cities, the cold indifference of the Kthar ships, the final, agonizing erasure. The transmission from the planetary governor, a desperate, choked cry of, "Why?" before her signal vanished into static, was burned into their memory. Thorne, his face a mask of unspeakable grief, ordered the Stardust Drifter to run. Not towards Earth, not yet. He sent the recording, compressed into a tight beam burst, towards Sol. Then, he turned his ship towards the Kthar picket line, a suicidal feint to buy the transmission time. The Stardust Drifter, a tiny, insignificant vessel, charged the warships that had just murdered a world. It was destroyed in a flicker of Cthar energy beams, a final, defiant spark against an overwhelming darkness. But its message, carried on waves of sorrow and fury, was already streaking through the void. When the recording reached Earth, humanity fractured. Not along lines of nation or ideology, but along a single, jagged crack of shared agony. The initial shock was a planetary paralysis, a silence so profound it seemed the Earth itself held its breath. Then came the grief, a tidal wave that drowned out all other concerns. Borders, political squabbles, economic rivalries, they dissolved, meaningless in the face of such an unutterable crime. The images from the Stardust Drifter played on every screen, in every settlement across the Sol system and its colonies. The last, desperate plea of Alicia VII's governor echoed in the silence of a billion stunned minds. From that grief, something else began to coalesce. A cold, crystalline rage. It was not the fleeting, emotional outburst the Cthar and the Concord expected of humans. This was different. It was the fury of a species pushed beyond the precipice, a species that had looked into the abyss and found an answering emptiness within itself. A single, unspoken vow rippled through the collective human consciousness: never again. This would not be forgotten. This would not be forgiven. The High Terran Council, once a body of fractious debate, became a monolith of singular purpose. The delegates, their faces pale and drawn, voted unanimously. Humanity would withdraw. Not in defeat, but in preparation. All interstellar traffic ceased. All diplomatic channels with the Concord were severed, not with angry pronouncements, but with a sudden, unnerving silence. Human space went dark. To the galaxy, it appeared as if the fledgling species had collapsed under the trauma, shattered by the Cthar's casual brutality. The Concord archives noted it as a regrettable but predictable outcome for such an emotionally unstable race. Varkos, on Cthar Prime, accepted a commendation for his decisive action, remarking that the galaxy was quieter, and more orderly, without human chatter. 50 standard years passed. Half a century. In galactic terms, a blink. To the Cthar, humanity was a fading, unpleasant memory. To the Concord, they were a cautionary tale, filed away and forgotten. But within the shrouded systems of Sol, humanity had not been idle. They had not been grieving in perpetuity. They had been working. The unified rage had become a focused engine of invention and transformation. The Black Vaults, repositories of humanity's most dangerous theoretical sciences, once sealed by ethics councils and fears of self-annihilation, were thrown open. Quantum engineering, gravitic manipulation, temporal mechanics, concepts once relegated to the fringes of possibility, became the pillars of a new, desperate science. The greatest minds of humanity, driven by the ghosts of Alicia 7, worked with a terrifying clarity. Their society remade itself. Children were raised on stories of New Terra, not as victims, but as martyrs whose sacrifice demanded an answer. The arts that the elder races had found perplexing became tools of memorial, of resolve. Every factory, every laboratory, every mind was bent to a single task, the creation of a defense, and a retribution, so absolute that no one would ever dare strike humanity again. They forged new alloys in the hearts of stars, grew crystalline superstructures in zero gravity, interfaced human consciousness with quantum computers. They did not just build ships, they forged instruments of judgment. And they remembered. Every day, the names of the 10 million dead on Alicia 7 were recited in solemn ceremonies. The final transmission from the Stardust Drifter was a sacred text. Humanity was hardening, its collective psyche being tempered in a crucible of controlled fury and methodical purpose. The emotional species the Cthar had dismissed was systematically excising sentimentality, replacing it with a cold, diamond-hard resolve. They were becoming something the galaxy had never conceived of. Then, on the 51st anniversary of the Alicia 7 massacre, as Kthar Hegemon Revak presided over a grand military parade showcasing the hegemony's undiminished strength in the Vanter Nebula, a single, unidentifiable vessel dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. It was sleek, impossibly black, absorbing all light, a void against the star-dusted canvas. It was larger than any Kthar dreadnought, yet it registered on no long-range sensors until it was already there, a silent, obsidian needle aimed at the heart of their demonstration. The Kthar fleet, hundreds of warships strong, bristled with weaponry. Their commanders, confident in their numbers and their proven technology, barked orders. "Identify yourself," demanded the Kthar flagship, the Invincible Fist, its transmission laced with imperial arrogance. There was no reply. Only silence. A silence that stretched, taut and heavy, across the calm channels. Then, the black ship moved. Not with the familiar flare of thrusters or the shimmer of gravitic drives. It simply shifted. One moment it was at the edge of the system, the next it was a mere 1,000 kilometers from the Invincible Fist. No energy signature, no drive wake, nothing. It was as if space itself had folded to accommodate its passage. Aboard the Kthar vessels, readouts flickered and died. Targeting systems failed to lock. Astrogators stared in disbelief at instruments that seemed to weep sensor ghosts. The human ship was a phantom, an impossibility. It hung there, motionless, a perfect, symmetrical shape of utter blackness, radiating a coldness that had nothing to do with temperature. Hegemon Revak, his four mandibles clattering in sudden unease, ordered, "All ships, open fire. Destroy that thing." A torrent of plasma bolts, laser beams, and kinetic slugs converged on the black vessel. A storm of destructive energy that could crack a small moon. The Kthar watched, expecting an incandescent explosion. Instead, something happened that defied their understanding of physics. As the energy waves approached the human ship, they seemed to bend. Not deflect, not absorb, but curve around its hull as if the ship existed in a subtly different dimension, a bubble of warped spacetime. The lethal energies harmlessly dissipated into the void on the other side. Not a scorch mark. Not a flicker of shields. A collective gasp, a ripple of pure, undiluted shock, went through the Kthar fleet. Their mightiest weapons had been rendered utterly impotent, ignored as if they were children's toys. This was their first true look at a warship of the new humanity. And it made the Kthar fleet, the pride of the hegemony, freeze. Every gunner, every captain, every crew member felt a primal fear, a cold dread seeping into their carapaces. Then, the human ship acted. It did not fire a weapon in the conventional sense. From its prow, a beam of what looked like pure darkness lanced out. It was not energy, not matter. It was an unmaking. It touched the Invincible Fist, and the Kthar flagship, a vessel of kilometers-long armored might, simply ceased to be. One moment it was there, proud and defiant, the next, only empty space, not even debris, only a lingering whisper of void. The unmaking beam, impossibly swift, then flicked to two more Kthar dreadnoughts. They, too, vanished. No explosion, no wreckage, just absence. Panic, raw and unadulterated, ripped through the Kthar fleet. Their arrogance, built over centuries of conquest, shattered into a million terrified shards. This was not warfare as they knew it. This was extermination delivered with chilling precision. This was a power beyond their comprehension. The black ship, now identified by a single, stark white insignia that bloomed on its hull, a stylized phoenix rising from ashes, the sigil of Terra, began to move through the Kthar formation. It did not hurry. It did not need to. More beams of unmaking flicked out, silent, merciless. With each erasure, the cold dread in the remaining Kthar ships intensified. Some tried to flee, engines flaring desperately. The human ship did not pursue. It simply excised those closest, those who represented the core of Kthar military power present. A voice, calm, cold, and utterly devoid of emotion, finally broke the silence. It was broadcast on all Kthar frequencies, in perfect, unaccented Kthari. "We are human. We remember Alicia 7-inch." The voice was not a declaration of war. It was a statement of fact, a promise kept. Admiral Lyra Kane, commander of the human vessel, designated Retribution class, hull name UNS Vengeance, watched the Kthar fleet dissolving on her main view screen. Her face, etched with lines that spoke of more than just age, remained impassive. Her parents had been on New Terra. She had been a child, evacuated on one of the last transports before the final siege, carrying with her the nightmares of a dying world. For 50 years, she, like all of humanity, had nurtured that memory. Now, she was its instrument. The Vengeance did not destroy the entire Kthar fleet at Vanter. It could have. Instead, after crippling its command structure and eliminating a significant portion of its capital ships, it simply vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind a bewildered, terrified remnant and a gaping wound in the Kthar psyche. The message was clear: humanity had returned, and they were not the pleading, emotional beings the galaxy remembered. They were something far older, far colder. They were judgment. The news of the Vanter engagement, as it came to be known, spread through the galactic concord like a shockwave. Initial reports were dismissed as hysteria, as exaggerated tales from routed Kthar commanders trying to excuse their failure. But the sensor logs, the visual recordings from surviving Kthar ships, the sheer impossibility of what they described, it could not be denied. A human warship, singular and terrifying, had dismantled a Kthar battle group with technology that beggared belief. The arrogance of the Concord faltered, replaced by a stunned, fearful silence. Humanity did not issue declarations or demands. They simply began their campaign. It was not a blitzkrieg of chaotic destruction, but a systematic, calculated dismantling of the Kthar hegemony. Small, hyper-advanced human flotillas, led by ships like the Vengeance, appeared without warning deep within Kthar territory. They targeted military shipyards, communications hubs, key industrial worlds, and fleets that dared to gather. Each strike was precise, devastating, and often accompanied by a simple, chilling broadcast, for New Terra, or sometimes, just the replayed audio of Governor Eris Thorne's final, choked plea from Alicia 7. The Kthar, once the predators of the galaxy, found themselves hunted. Their fleets were outmaneuvered, their technology hopelessly outclassed. Human ships moved like ghosts, their weapons defied known physics. They employed gravitic lenses to focus stellar energy into pinpoint beams, deployed phase cloaking that made them undetectable until the moment of attack, and utilized weaponized singularities that didn't just destroy targets but erased them from spacetime. The Kthar built vast defensive armadas, only to see them bypassed or methodically annihilated. Psychological warfare was a key component of the human strategy. They broadcast the Kthar's own records of atrocities, not just against humanity, but against other, lesser species the hegemony had crushed in its ascent. They turned Kthar propaganda networks into conduits for these truths, sowing dissent and fear among the hegemony's populace and its subject worlds. Systems began to rebel, encouraged by the sudden vulnerability of their overlords. The Kthar's iron grip on its empire started to crack. Their allies, sensing the shift in power, grew distant, then hostile. The Concord Assembly met in emergency session. Panic filled the grand halls. Delegates from species who had long chafed under Kthar dominance now spoke with newfound boldness, while those allied with the Kthar trembled. Some factions urged immediate intervention, a united Concord fleet to crush this human menace. Others, more pragmatic, pointed to the Vanter engagement and the subsequent, unbroken string of human victories. How could they fight an enemy whose capabilities were so far beyond their own? An enemy who seemed to anticipate every move, every counter. High Terran Command, operating from a shielded, mobile fortress deep within the Sol system, known only as Sanctum, orchestrated the campaign with cold precision. The AI designated Solace, a quantum entity of unimaginable processing power, analyzed Kthar responses, predicted their strategies, and guided human forces with unerring accuracy. Solace had been born from the trauma of Alicia 7, its core programming infused with the directive, ensure humanity's absolute security. It did not feel anger or hatred, only the logical imperative to neutralize any and all existential threats. And the Cthar hegemony was, by every metric, such a threat. As the human campaign pressed on, it became chillingly clear to the galaxy that what they were witnessing was not humanity's full strength. The ships engaged in the dismantling were but the tip of the spear. Whispers began to circulate of even more terrifying capabilities held in reserve, weapons that could rewrite reality, fleets that numbered not in dozens, but in thousands, hidden in pocket dimensions, waiting. The Nemesis engine, a theoretical device capable of unraveling the fabric of spacetime itself, was rumored to be more than just theory in the human black vaults. This calculated restraint, this implication of far greater, unspoken power, was perhaps more terrifying than outright annihilation. It instilled a deeper, more pervasive dread. What else were humans capable of, if this was merely their measured response? The Cthar hegemony, once a monolithic power that spanned a quarter of the spiral arm, began to crumble. Its vast military was shattered, its economy in ruins, its subject worlds in open revolt. Faith in the hegemon and the ruling council evaporated. Cthar systems, desperate to avoid human retribution, began to secede, declaring neutrality or even attempting to curry favor with the silent, advancing humans. Warlords emerged from the collapsing military structure, carving out petty fiefdoms, fighting amongst themselves for the scraps of a dying empire. The cohesion of centuries vanished in a matter of months under the relentless, focused pressure of human justice. In a desperate, final gamble, the Cthar High Command, now a fractured council of terrified warlords operating from a hidden bunker deep beneath Cthar Prime, authorized the activation of the Starbreaker, an ancient weapon of last resort, a relic from a forgotten war, capable of destabilizing a star and consuming an entire system in a supernova. It was a weapon so horrific, so indiscriminate, that its use was forbidden even by Cthar doctrine. They aimed it at a rendezvous point where a major human task force was expected, hoping to annihilate them in a blaze of stellar fire, a final act of defiance. The Starbreaker was launched. It streaked towards its target star. But it never reached it. Human intelligence, guided by Solace, had anticipated this move. A single, needle-thin human scout ship, the Silent Witness, decloaked directly in the Starbreaker's path. It didn't fire. It simply projected a localized containment field, a bubble of distorted spacetime that enveloped the ancient superweapon. The Starbreaker detonated within the field, its cataclysmic energies contained, imploding upon themselves, creating a momentary, miniature black hole that winked out of existence, taking the weapon with it. The human scout ship then broadcast a single message to the Cthar bunker: "Your desperation is noted." It changes nothing, the backfiring of their ultimate weapon broke the last vestiges of Cthar resistance. The human fleet, no longer small flotillas but a vast, silent armada, finally arrived in the Cthar home system. Hundreds of the black, Phoenix-marked warships materialized, surrounding Cthar Prime, a world now teetering on the brink of societal collapse. They did not bombard it. They did not deploy troops. They simply waited, their presence an overwhelming, suffocating pressure. The Cthar government dissolved. Warlords turned on each other or broadcast pleas for mercy. The once proud capital world fell into chaos, not from human attack, but from its own internal disintegration. Admiral Lyra Kane, aboard the UNS Vengeance, now orbiting Cthar Prime, received a communication from what remained of the Cthar Planetary Authority, a pathetic, terrified plea for terms. She listened, her expression unchanging. Then, she gave her orders. The human fleet did not land. They did not occupy. Instead, they projected holographic images into the skies of every major Cthar city. Images of New Terra, before and after. Images of the Stardust Drifter's final moments. The names of the 10 million dead scrolled endlessly. Then, Admiral Kane's voice, amplified across the planet: "You stand judged. Your empire is broken. Your arrogance has met its consequence. We could unmake this world as you unmade ours. We could silence your species for all time. A pause, heavy with the unspoken threat of absolute annihilation. The Kthar waited, expecting the end. But we are not you, Kane continued, her voice resonating with cold finality. We do not seek to emulate your barbarity. We sought justice, and justice has been rendered. Remember this day. Remember why we came. Live with the ashes of your pride. That is your sentence. The human fleet then did something unexpected. They began to withdraw. Not all at once, but methodically, deliberately, leaving behind a sufficient force to ensure Kthar Prime did not descend into complete self-destruction, but making it clear that their primary task was complete. This act of restraint, after such a devastating campaign, was perhaps the most shocking of all to the watching galaxy. It was not mercy in the traditional sense. It was a calculated demonstration of absolute power, of control so complete that annihilation was unnecessary. They had made their point. The Kthar were broken, their threat extinguished. The fall of the Kthar hegemony sent ripples of fear and awe throughout the galactic concord. The old order was shattered. The balance of power had not just shifted, it had been inverted. Humanity, the forgotten, underestimated species, now stood as the preeminent force in the galaxy. No one dared challenge them. No one dared question their motives. An uneasy silence descended. Worlds that had once aligned with the Kthar scrambled to declare their neutrality, their friendship, their utter respect for human sovereignty. The Concord Assembly became a forum for hushed whispers and nervous glances towards the empty seats once occupied by human delegates. The establishment of this new human dominance was not through treaty or conquest in the traditional sense, but through the chilling demonstration of their capabilities and their resolve. The galaxy entered a new era, one defined by the silent, watchful presence of humanity. They did not seek to rule. They did not interfere in the affairs of other species, unless those affairs threatened to spill over into human space or echoed the kind of arrogance that had led to Alicia 7. They became the ultimate deterrent, a sleeping giant whose wrath, once awakened, was absolute. Humanity's victory inspired a spectrum of reactions across the galaxy. Some oppressed species, long suffering under the heel of larger powers, saw hope, a chance to fight for their own liberation, though few possessed the means or the singular focus of humanity. Other, more opportunistic factions, saw a power vacuum, a chance to rise, some even attempting to mimic human tactics or claim association, though these were usually clumsy and short-lived imitations. The very nature of interstellar conflict was being re-evaluated in light of what humanity had shown. Within humanity itself, the victory was met not with joyous celebration, but with a somber, weary satisfaction. The ghosts of Alicia 7 had been avenged, but the cost was etched into their collective soul. Now came the difficult questions. What had they become in their quest for justice? The tools they had forged, the capabilities they now possessed, could they be controlled? Should they be? Factions began to emerge within the Terran High Council and the military command. There were the isolationists, who argued that humanity should withdraw completely, guarding its own systems and leaving the chaotic galaxy to its own devices. We have shown them our strength, argued Counselor Eris Thorne, grandson of the Stardust Drifter's captain, his voice heavy with the weight of history. Let that memory be our shield. We need no further engagement. Opposing them were the interventionists, led by figures like General Marcus Valerius, who believed that humanity now had a responsibility, a burden, to prevent such atrocities from happening to others, to use their power to enforce a just peace. We cannot stand by while other Alicias burn, he countered. Power without responsibility is a different kind of tyranny. And then there were the Sentinels, a more shadowy faction, largely composed of intelligence operatives and members of the Black Vault's scientific corps. They advocated for eternal vigilance, for maintaining humanity's technological and military superiority at all costs, arguing that the galaxy was inherently hostile and that another threat, perhaps even greater than the Kthar, would inevitably arise. They whispered of new, nascent powers stirring in the unexplored regions of the void, of ancient dormant intelligences that might awaken. The AI Solace, in its cold, logical way, subtly supported the Sentinel viewpoint, calculating probabilities of future threats with unnerving accuracy. These internal debates were not merely philosophical. The remnants of the Cthar hegemony, though shattered, still existed. Some warlords, driven by mad desperation or a thirst for revenge, attempted to rally forces in secret, seeking forgotten technologies or trying to forge alliances with other pariah states. These were minor threats, easily contained by human patrols, but they served as a constant reminder that the embers of conflict could always reignite. More concerning were whispers of rogue human elements, individuals who believed the retribution against the Cthar had not gone far enough, or who sought to use humanity's new power for personal gain or more extreme ideologies. The Nemesis engine, still a theoretical but potent symbol, became a focal point for these internal struggles, its potential use a subject of intense, classified debate. A new, fragile status quo settled upon the galaxy. It was a peace born of fear, a quiet enforced by the shadow of human warships. Humanity itself grappled with its new role. They had become the silent arbiters of galactic stability, a position they had never sought but now could not easily relinquish. The High Terran Council eventually adopted a policy of armed neutrality and watchful deterrence. They would not govern the galaxy, but they would monitor it. They would not interfere, unless red lines, clearly, though privately, communicated to the major galactic powers, were crossed. These lines primarily concerned the unprovoked extermination of civilian populations and the development of weapons that threatened cosmic stability. The burden of this power was immense. The generation that had overseen the retribution was aging, replaced by those who had grown up in a universe where humanity was the dominant force. The memories of Alicia 7 were still taught, still revered, but the raw, visceral pain was inevitably receding with time. Would future generations understand the sacrifices made? Would they wield humanity's power with the same cold restraint, or would they succumb to the arrogance that had once defined their enemies? The final act of the Cthar campaign was not a battle, but a monument. On the now barren surface of what was once Alicia 7, human engineers, using controlled matter fabrication, erected a single, impossibly tall spire of pure, black obsidian, identical in material and form to the hull of the UNS Vengeance. It pierced the sky, visible from orbit, a stark, silent sentinel. At its base, inscribed in every known galactic language, were the names of the 10 million dead, and a single, unadorned statement: we remembered, no threats, no boasts of victory. Just that simple, chilling declaration. The galaxy understood. It was a promise and a warning. A testament to a species that had been pushed too far, that had journeyed into darkness and returned, wielding it as a shield and a sword. The cycle of conflict was perhaps not broken, for the universe was vast and ambition eternal, but its parameters had been irrevocably altered. The memory of humanity's rise, of their terrible justice, would linger for eons, a cautionary tale whispered in the star lanes. The cost of underestimation had been etched into the galactic consciousness, written in the void left by vanished warships and the silent testament of a black spire on a dead world. The question that remained, hanging heavy in the silence of the new era, was whether humanity, having stared into the abyss of vengeance, had truly managed to avoid becoming a reflection of what it had fought to destroy. Only time, and the ever-unfolding tapestry of the cosmos, would tell. For now, there was only the quiet, and the watchful eyes of a species that had learned the bitter price of being ignored.